Hey everybody, welcome back to the Men of the Kingdom podcast. My name is Kyle, so my co-host Aaron. If you're new to the channel, we want to say welcome. And if you're one of our faithful viewers, we want to say welcome back. Purpose of all this is to help men live successful lives according to God's design. And on this episode, I think we did that and probably much more as we have our guest, Terry Langeland, here. We covered a host of different topics from marriage, family, raising kids, leadership, and so much more. There was a ton of value that I know we got out of it, and we're confident you're also going to get that as well. So thanks for watching, and let's jump right in. Terry, we finally did it. We got you on here. We're super excited. You've obviously been a big pillar of both Aaron and my faith walk, but also just a good mentor and friend to both of us. And so we're blessed to have you on the show here tonight to hopefully get some of your wisdom and just learn from your life experience and all the things that God's taught you throughout your life, and you've learned the hard way, the easy way. And so really just from the bottom of Aaron and our heart, we want to say thank you for being here. And obviously for people who may not know you, if you could just give a brief intro to who Terry Langeland is, and then we have a bunch of questions to go through with you.
Wow. So Terry Langeland, there aren't many highlights. I'm just an average guy who got to know Jesus in my late teens and have stumbled closer to home, learning sometimes, like you said, Kyle, the hard way. But also, I've had mentors in my own life and people praying for me, and I just feel supported by grace. I'm a father of four. I've been married for 33 years. 28 of them were happy. But
Jane, I hope you're not watching this tonight.
Genuinely, our marriage is better now than it ever has been. We have learned communication strategies and skills, and more importantly, forgiveness and what's really important. And so I have a little painting business that has fed the family and paid for education and weddings, and I have a lot of gratitude for where I'm at in life compared to where I was philosophically, mentally, spiritually in my early and late teens. So I'm happy to share the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Well, I think that's one of the things I've appreciated about your story, because from the outside, getting to know you when I moved up to the cities, joined your connection group, you kind of have this picture of, man, this dude's probably walked with the Lord forever, perfect, never made mistakes, but obviously we all have a story, and you obviously shared some of those. So I think that's kind of where I wanted to start with you is, obviously you see where you're at now, and you were talking about before we started recording just how you looked at each of these decades of your life and you've seen how God has grown you and used you. But I think there's a lot of people, even maybe watching this show, where they've been walking with the Lord for a long time, but then we go through these seasons of feeling distant or struggling with whatever, just feeling disengaged. So I guess when you reflect on your life, is there a season that comes to mind where you may have known biblical truth and maybe was walking with the Lord, but you just felt this distance or struggle? And what was that like for you? And more importantly, how did you navigate through that to weather that storm? I just think that'd be important for us and people listening.
Yeah. Okay, so these are some things that maybe I haven't even discussed with you guys earlier, but I had a period of time that was a crippling drug abuse season of my life. And it was during my late teens, early 20s. And it was before I knew God, and I had grown up in a very fundamental legalistic denomination that claimed to know what truth was, but there was just not a lot of evidence, no fruit in the life of most of the people that I knew. So I had rejected a relationship with God as possible or even desirable, and I spiraled into a time where I went from thinking I knew it all to realizing I don't know anything. And at that time in my life, my older brother, who was a couple years farther down the road of searching for answers to what's worth living for, in response to an invitation from my mom to attend a weekend Bible conference for for a miraculous, who knows why, but miraculous is the pivotal word. He attended and he heard the gospel and he realized he didn't have to be the hero, that God himself was the hero and loved us because we needed loving, not because we were worth loving. And I saw over the next year a change in my brother Van's life that was just undeniable, not because of self-help strategies or willpower. He just was becoming a different man. And my life was increasingly not meaningful, and I was in a tough position. And on a long driving trip with him, taking my sister down to college in Nebraska, on the way home, he shared the gospel and the Bible. I knew the Bible stories. I just didn't know what those stories pointed toward. So he unpacked from Genesis to Revelation, from Eden to Eden Restored, how God has been trying to earn our trust and our love and our fellowship. And it was just mind-blowing to think, wow. So that is the foundation for the answer to the question. My life had become so dependent on things that were sinful in nature to try to satisfy my needs, that in order to develop a relationship with God, my life had to radically change. And it needed a whole different environment, a whole different climate. You know, like there's certain plants that are called indigenous because they grow in a specific climate. I literally needed to be in a different climate for God to have any hope of bringing what I had seen in my brother into my own life. So there were some changes in friendships, but also changes in what I was planting in my own mind. You know, you can't expect to eat from your garden if you never plant seeds. And so my brother just taught me the basics of you need to put some seeds of truth into your life to combat the weeds of lies that you have believed now for a few years. And so it began a practice, Kyle. This is a long answer, but it began a practice of never missing a day of trying to get realigned with what really is truth and what is a lie. So that's God is in the process of revealing truth and exposing lies. So I feel like I'm like a diabetic who needs insulin. I genuinely need to be in God's presence every day, or the old Terry just starts surfacing, and I start being convinced maybe those lies do have some truth in them. So I have been not in a legalistic way of checking boxes, but just like survival mode of I want to spend time with God every day because I know what happens in my life if He's not present and guiding and guarding and keeping. So
that's good. I remember I can't remember who was preaching. It might have been Tony, and he brought you up. I feel like you get referenced quite a bit on stage, but he said one thing he learned from you is something you passed him is that you try not to leave the house until you've had this like awe moment of God, or something along those lines, where it might be a couple verses, it could be multiple chapters, but like you said, this constant refilling and reminder of who God is. And I've seen that in my own life too, where you can notice the days that you have, the good days and the bad days, and it's almost directly proportional to how much time you spent, usually at the beginning of your day, with God. And so it's just interesting to hear that from you, because even at your age and what you've learned through your life, it's like you still need that.
Oh, boy.
I think that's a good reminder for even us younger guys.
And I do want to throw a qualifier in there. It isn't how much time I've spent. It's have I spent time with God. You know, so it isn't a matter of just reading a certain number of verses or a certain series of chapters or Devo books. It's really about, God, will you speak to my heart personally? I want to worship you, but my heart is prone to worship in everything else. And so that's my goal, is to be reminded, no, God is real. He wants to be in my life. So that's my goal. I'm not trying to acquire more theological knowledge. I'm wanting to be with God again.
Yeah, that's good. I have a couple follow-up questions, but I'll go to you first, Aaron.
Well, I was curious because I feel like I know you fairly well and still didn't know that you had that season of struggle. So, we have a younger crowd typically that watches this, a lot of younger men. So what would you say to the guy that maybe doesn't even know how the heck they stumbled across this video? They said, why am I getting something about the gospel, or why am I getting this Christian video, but they're sticking this out and they're saying, hey, you know what? Maybe the Lord put this video and these three guys I've never seen on my screen for a reason. Like if there's somebody in that season, that 18 to early 20s battling, you name the sin, could be drugs, could be lust, could be anger. And maybe they don't know the gospel, but they have a longing, or they just feel that tug.
Yeah.
Like what would you say to, and I know you're involved with college ministry to an extent, so you probably actually do this too, but what do you say to young men who are kind of still in that season, but have a desire to get out of it?
Oh. Well, what comes to mind right now, Aaron, is that the reason successful fishermen catch fish is they know what fish want. And it's packaged around a hook, but the fish thinks they're going to get something that they want. And Satan has done a great job of packaging sin in this attractive, this is going to make you happy, Terry. This will make you feel good, look good, be important. And the reality is the first time that I drank or smoked weed was genuinely fun. I laughed and had a good time. There was no consequences. And I went, no wonder. My parents didn't want me to do this because they didn't want me to have fun. And so that was the nibble of the bait of, without recognizing that there was a hook in it. And the hook got set not long after that. And the pleasure of sin kept decreasing and the consequences kept increasing. So what I would say is just be honest with yourself. Are you alert to the consequences of what you think you can't live without? Because it's killing you day by day.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so funny thinking about ourselves like the fish. It's like it's just too good. You can't not take the bait.
It's just hanging around here. I don't even have to chase it.
Did you have something?
No, that's great.
You mentioned when you were younger and you were kind of going through that season, and now even with the church we're involved in with big college ministry, I guess I see and I hear and I talk to a lot of people, even younger guys, that they feel like there's a deeper meaning to life or a bigger purpose. Like they're searching for something, but they don't always acknowledge God, or especially the God of the Bible. But I guess from you and your perspective, what do you think is holding people back, or the biggest hindrance to men or women coming to know God? Even if they have this idea of a bigger power, they want that to be true. What do you think is the thing that holds people back from really pursuing a relationship with Jesus? What's that thing?
For me, and I think I'm normal in terms of a sinner, human. I thought that God would ask me to not do things that my flesh wanted to do, and I would have to do things I didn't want to do. And I thought that was the path to escaping punishment in hell. I had to be this good guy that didn't have fun and went through the motions of being a good neighbor without any joy en route, because that's kind of what I had seen. So I think we're born believing. I mean, I have had babies, and I know that they're all about themselves. They want their needs met right now. And that's just the early indication of who we all are. We want our needs met by others with very little effort and all reward. So I think it's fundamentally not understanding that God wants us to discover a way of life that doesn't have destructive consequences, but against all odds, actually I'm happy. And that's what I saw in my brother. I saw him actually begin, he would come over and say, hey, let's go out and wash your car. It's kind of gotten dirty. Like volunteer to help me. This is something he never would have done. And he was joyful and happy and wasn't regretting it. There was no strings attached. And I have found that true in my own life, is that the principles of God's kingdom are always life-giving, but they don't appear to be. It's what I find in my relationship with my wife. I am happiest when I'm serving her and attentive to her needs. That's just when I'm the happiest. But I don't anticipate that helping with the dishes will make me happy. I just don't anticipate that until I do it. Mm-hmm. So I think it's because we're born in darkness and attracted to darkness and think that light's going to hurt our eyes and we're not going to enjoy being in the light. And we just need to literally discover that God He created us. He knows what will make us happy. We just need to gradually discover more and more. Oh, He knows more about me than I know myself.
We were just talking about that, I think, in the last episode of like these what seem like paradoxes in the Bible, where it's more blessed to give than to receive, or you must give up your life to truly find it. Almost all these opposite things, like you're saying. And I think we've all experienced that in our lives too, where it's the more we think about ourselves or our pleasures, our desires, our outcomes, the more discontent, sad, depressed, lonely, anxious we feel. And so I think trusting, is the hard part, like you said, that God's way is better, and taking almost that step in faith, like, okay, I'm just going to do it. And then you realize, like, oh man, this is such a better life than living for myself. And so hard to do sometimes in practice, that's sure. But
it is. But, isn't it the same in staying healthy? Exercise. Like, I have to exercise to feel good, but I never look forward to actually starting to exercise. But I know if I do it, I'll be thankful that I did it. So I think that physical reality is true in the spiritual world.
No doubt.
I kind of building off the very practical example just of staying healthy. I think as I've gotten a little bit older, became married, own a home, all that, I just have like so much more of an admiration for older men who just manage their lives well. Like from the outside, when you're younger, I don't feel like you ever really like appreciate. You go to someone's house and it's really clean. Well, it's like, yeah, your house is just clean. Until you own your own house and you realize, wow, keeping my yard looking nice takes time or money or sometimes both. Yeah. And the more I get to know you and Jane, I just have a real admiration for you guys. Do a great job of juggling the important balls of life well. Okay. Like there may be some things that you're human, right? So they fall, they slip off. But when I look at family, spiritual growth, church involvement, work, marriage, like you guys just do a great job at making time for those things. Just curious, like how do you do that practically? How do you approach that? How do you think about that? What are obviously spiritual? That's why you're here. That's the priority. But what are like your biggest priorities in life, and how do you approach just kind of managing all those things well?
This is going to be probably disappointingly simple. But when we first got married, and personally before I got married, I chose as a life verse, seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. And so I have I've strived to put God first in every day of my life, and He promised, if you abide in me, you will bear fruit. So I don't really want any of the credit, except I've been seeking God honestly, and the good things in my life would not have happened. I wish you could know the younger me, because then you would say, yeah, God's the hero for sure. But I don't think it's, I just genuinely feel like, well, you'll genuinely understand this as a father, is that your child will grow up slowly and become more and more like an adult by just observing how you do life, and you'll be imitated. And so God has been my father throughout life, and I've been watching him, and he puts me first. And so that little bit of an instinct to put other people first is from him. So I feel like there are great principles, but it's the same as like a diet. You have to actually eat the diet, not just know about the diet in order for it to benefit you. And so I have just wanted to be in God's presence. I want to abide in the vine and then trust that there will be good fruit in my life. Not so much learning what does fruit look like, what should fruit smell like. I just want to bear whatever fruit comes from being attached to that vine. So
I have a funny story quick, Kyle, that you'll appreciate. Sammy and I did marriage counseling with Terry and Jane, and that answer reminded me, I'll never forget, first day of marriage counseling, you guys took us out for breakfast. I was so excited. Sammy and I have been waiting for weeks. It's like, yes, the Langelands, like Terry's an elder, Jane is the best. We're just going to pick these guys' brain. Like we're going to get the good stuff out of these guys. And I had a blank notebook. I was just sitting down, nice strong cup of coffee, just ready to just take every single note of your guys' decades of marriage. And literally the lady went, like took our order, doesn't even come back with our food. And Terry goes, you know, you guys, you're probably going to be disappointed. He said,
and sure enough, I was right.
he said, yeah, he goes, you know, I could give you guys, Jane and I, we could give you all the best tips on marriage, the best tactics, the best strategies. And unfortunately, if you guys don't put the Lord first in your marriage, none of it will work.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, bring those pancakes over.
Where's the bacon?
But just that's exactly it. And yeah, I mean, we found that to be incredibly true in our marriage. So not surprised that was your answer. I thought I'm going to keep trying to pull the string and rephrase that question until that answer goes into my head and heart. But no, that's an awesome answer. I think you live that truth, and I'm just going to keep trying to find creative ways to get you to answer the question differently, but it'll never happen. I think you are answering it truthfully.
So we have genuinely been encouraged by great marriage conferences and reading books on marriage. And it isn't that that information isn't good.
Yeah.
But if it isn't accompanied with a heart that wants to do it,
Right.
then it almost is worse, because then my heart is kind of starting to get numb, and I'm literally rebelling against what I know I ought to do.
Yeah.
And there's shame that accompanies that. And so I think just fundamentally the foundation needs to be, God, give me a heart that wants to be a good husband, and then teach me how to do that. So
Yeah, no, that's great.
good. Which is kind of where I want to go next with just marriage, family, and relationships.
Okay.
Because like you mentioned, it's hard to do that. And we're interesting just kind of this phase of life where you've been married for 33 years, got multiple kids. You're married, not quite
Almost
3.
three,
Is it
yeah.
almost 3 already? Yeah, this July,
Catching up
right?
to you guys.
33 weeks. Okay, nothing.
And as I'm maturing, obviously single, not married yet, but you do start to see these parallels of how God has designed marriage and then kids and his reflection of his relationship with us. So I'm just curious, now that you've been married 33 years, one, walk us through kind of that journey, but what did you learn about God, or what are some things that surprised you as you entered marriage, and now that you've been doing this for so long, how do you feel like your relationship or perception and how you see God has changed now being a married man versus when you were single? Have you noticed the difference, and if so, what was that like?
I bet this will be another answer that you didn't expect or don't want. But the brother that I told you about who led me to Jesus is single, like you are, but a few decades older than you are. So my older brother has never gotten married, and he's arguably one of the happiest men that I know. Great walk with God, involved in ministry. And so my genuine belief is that God is able to take any human in any season of life and teach them kingdom principles and fulfill them. It doesn't need to be by being a parent, but God uses parenthood to reveal my selfishness, and his love. It's kind of both. I see, oof, I'm not as good a father as my Heavenly Father is. But then I remember one time specifically, Kyle, when everyone in the house had the flu at the same time. And Jane and I were kind of like, I can't do it. You're going to have to do this. So it's changing diapers and helping clean up the cribs and all this kind of stuff. And I realized in the process of doing this, there was just a mess in one of our kids' rooms. And I didn't resent it, even though I was sick. In fact, I felt sorry and compassion toward my child who was sick and felt a love for them that didn't make sense. It was so clearly unselfish love that God has had for me. When I'm a mess and it doesn't seem like it'd be fun to clean up my life, but he just kind of steps in and says, no, I don't want you to be sick longer. I'm going to try to get you back to health. So,
yeah, it's good. And it's probably one of those things that you can't fully grasp until you are a parent or go through that. You can kind of get a glimpse of it, but I'm sure it's just a deeper level of love. We work out at the Lifetime across the street here, and there's where the sauna is. You'll sit in there. There's the kind of the kids pool, and you'll see. I just like to watch the parents, and I'll never forget. There was one with his son, little guy, and then his father, and you can just see the genuine love for this kid as he's playing with him, and it's just this, albeit maybe dimmer reality of what God's love is for us, but it just makes you think like, man, we have a Heavenly Father that cares about us and just sees us as his child that he loves. And so to hear that from you, even in the sickness and the throw up and who else knows what other fluids, it's like there was just this heart of compassion for your kid, and it's just a good reminder.
But what I also wanted that answer to reveal is how able God is to teach me whatever I need to know about him through specifically whatever unique circumstances I'm in. You don't have to be a father to experience that. Our family went on a family missions trip. It was a 2-week missions trip. And I was with people that I didn't speak their native language. I experienced a love for them that was unexplainable. Didn't originate because I was such a good guy and had it was just God revealing, I can give you love for the least of these. And so what I wanted you to know, my brother has never been married, has never had children, but he knows God well. His heart is fulfilled. He's grown into a man that I admire. So I think young adults often think, oh, if I could only experience this kind of life circumstance, then it would all come together for me. And that's so radically not true in God's kingdom. Singleness, my brother was a marriage and family counselor. That was the emphasis of his training, and he didn't get married. But a part of it was because he was dealing with unhappy married people. He was routinely trying to teach them how to get back in love, but they were beyond thinking that they were part of the solution. It was the other person's fault. And so he told me, I think this is close to verbatim. He said, Terry, I'm 85% happy, and if being in a committed relationship with married to another woman doesn't improve that, then it doesn't seem like it's a great trajectory for my life. And so he never did ask another woman to marry him, and he's had great relationships. So mainly I would just be right now speaking against discontent and thinking, oh, I have to have children to know what the love of God is like, or I have to get married to know what intimacy is like. I'm wanting to say, no, that's not true.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a really good question. And what I think is interesting, I love your answer too, because it's just very unconventional. If you listen to 50 podcasts, especially Christian podcasts, I think it would very much talk about like all the gifts of marriage, all the blessings, all that. But what you're saying is biblical. Like Paul talks about that, right? Of not everybody should be married. and all these different things. But I do want to look at it from the flip side of it, because I think there's two ditches that men can fall in.
Good.
Now, the one you're talking about is one that I don't think gets covered a lot, which is the I need insert XYZ and then I'll be happy. I think that's a great takeaway. Also, I think that there's a generation of men, and I feel this in myself too, of having fear of, before getting married, it's like, this is a huge commitment, right? Or before you have children, this is so scary. I think for whatever reason, like that's a very active fear in men our age. So what would you say to those guys that maybe have a longing for that, or just guys who are listening to this and they're saying, should I be married someday if God's calling me to that? What would you say? Just, I know it could be your lived experience or just advice to men as they're entering those years where kind of the flip side of what you were saying. Like, yes, maybe not everyone is called towards those things, but if they are, like, what would your advice to them be? Maybe the other side of the coin.
Well, the other side of the coin, honestly, Aaron, is that I think that we're naturally wired to wish things would be different. I know of married guys who wish they had more free time and could do what they wanted to do when they wanted to do it.
Right.
And marriage hasn't been this utopia that they expected it to be when they were courting. And then I see a lot of parents who aren't enjoying being parents, and the children are just a drag. And so what I would say to any man or woman listening, I don't know what the demographics of the listeners are, but is to enjoy today. I mean, just genuinely pursue a relationship with God and build friendships in your life and enjoy today, because season is going to change, and the things that are meaningful to you now, you're going to have to put on the back burner and make something else first. So life is surprisingly simple, and I think that it mainly is understand that we're wired to be unhappy and discontent, and wish things were different, and instead, if we would just focus on the relationships that are present in our lives and the people that we can spend time with, and just literally invest in their lives, we would have a happy today, and life will go the direction it needs to go.
That's good. Have you read the book Screw Tape Letters? Have you ever read that one?
Years ago, yeah.
Yeah, we just finished it, a book club with some guys from the church, and one of the chapters stood out to me. Talked about how say the word consistency or your normal life is not the same as stagnation. And a lot of times you get asked, like, hey, what's new with you? And it's like, well, I don't know. I'm still working out, going to work. I'm doing your thing.
Fair.
It's like, yeah, maybe I haven't got married, gone on a big trip, all this. And I think the enemy tries to, well, man, you're stuck in life. You're not making progress, versus that's a good thing. You have these routines, which aren't bad. But to your point is that's the message, is enjoy today.
Yeah.
And I'm reading this book right now. A friend recommended Single, Dating, Married, Engage. And the first part of it's this chapter or a couple chapters about singleness and how that is a gift to be used to advance the kingdom, and how much joy there can be there. But oftentimes, including myself at times, where it's like, okay, I'm just kind of existing until I get this. And then once you get that, then it's the next thing. And we miss out on so many cool years and opportunities that God wants to use, because we're always looking for the next thing. And so I think it's just a good reminder for ourselves, and especially for people listening too, that, hey, one, tomorrow's not guaranteed. We both talked before this started how people close to us, your daughter-in-law, brain tumor, guy from my work, blood cancer, where it's like their perspective on life changed like that when they got that diagnosis. And they probably wish, man, I wish I could have just had a normal day again, doing that normal life. And so I just need that reminder for myself too, is how are you using the time that God's given you and the opportunities he's put before you? Don't just always think about the next thing, because one, it's not guaranteed, and two, you miss out on the blessings now.
Right.
So I do have one question, which I think our demographic, people watching this, are probably skew on the younger side.
Okay.
But I think one of the, at least from parents I've heard, one of the best compliments you can give them is your kids, turned out really well. And I think that's so true of your kids, obviously, and your who they chose to marry. We've been close to a lot of them. And so I guess two questions. One, what advice would you give to parents who feel like they did the right things or tried to raise up kids in the right way, but those kids went a different direction and they're feeling maybe some guilt or responsibility for that? And then two, like, what's the secret, so to speak? But what were some of those things that you really feel like pointed your children in the right direction? And obviously they're adults now doing their own thing, but I guess both sides, what advice would you give? And then how did you do it so well?
Mm-hmm. Well, my kids have talked to me about the impact of my life on their life, and what they consistently point to is that they saw in real time that I was putting God first. And that I wasn't, I for sure was not a perfect father, and I've said I'm sorry to my kids, and there are things I wish I could do over and do differently, but they knew I wasn't do as I say, not as I do, because I really did, in a survival mode, put God first. And they saw me doing that. They saw me investing in other people's lives. And so, and then we had fun together. So the thing that I would tell parents is make sure your children feel enjoyed, that you enjoy spending time with them. It's the foundation for them to transfer up into responsible adults, because their identity is secure. Well,
That's good.
Yeah. So
you can keep going if you had more. It's just good.
Oh, I've got tons more. No, that was a good summary.
Yeah, that's good.
So kind of tying off that, this is sort of two-part. You said that living a good life or a successful life is surprisingly simple. Mm. So, okay, I'm probably most excited to ask this question, and it ties into what Kyle was saying too. You do have really awesome children. Specifically, this is men of the kingdom. So say we're talking to young men, right, but specifically your sons.
Okay.
Like if you could only leave your sons one sticky note of life advice, like boil down your views on life, what you think the most important things are. If that was one sticky note, well, maybe say it's not the tiniest sticky note.
Can it be with 3 or 4 sticky notes, or a list on one sticky note?
We got to get it down to one. Like, what would be, if you had to distill like everything you've learned about life, your principles that you pass on to your sons, like what would you say would be the most important?
Do hard things. Because that ultimately is required to do anything that's meaningful or successful. So don't look for the easy way. Embrace hard things, and you will benefit from it. So when I said it's simple, I didn't say it was easy. I said it's simple. Do hard things, and it will develop a character and a sense of competence. When things are easy, you'll genuinely feel easy. So I that's not spiritual, but it involves spiritual life. Having a devotional life is hard. I don't want to get up earlier. I don't want to try to get my sludgy brain to think about a supernatural kingdom, but God has been faithful in meeting me in that my little attempt, and so I guess I would say do hard things.
Yeah, that's good. I'd like to transition to kind of just leadership and church life, but more so on the leadership side with not everyone, including yourself. Obviously, you're an elder at the church, but you have a business. You're a business owner. You're leading people in that regards. We obviously have jobs that we work, but I guess for you in your life, how have you been able to keep God first in the business, and how do you live out your Christian life and not basically separate the two? Like, here I'm a business owner, I'm doing my thing, and then I go to church Sundays and I'm a Christian outside of that. How have you been able to tie the two together and really be a positive influence for your employees, your customers, but just how do you keep God central in everything you do? Obviously not perfect, but what have you been or found that's been helpful in that of just like God says, like whatever you do, eat or drink, sleep, like do it all for His glory. How have
Yeah.
you been able to do that in your business and just outside of the church walls, so to speak?
Okay. Well, the name of your podcast, Men of the Kingdom, I think is the pointer that God has a kingdom with foundational principles and ethics and strategies that revolve around integrity as much as anything else. And so when I said, what would I tell my sons, the sticky note, do hard things, I don't think there's many, I'm sure there's exceptions, but I don't think there's many successful businesses where the owner hasn't done hard things in launching, founding the business, building the business. And so as it relates to leadership, unless you see your leader doing hard things and leaning into that and accepting responsibility, not with complaint, but with I'm going to handle this. I'm going to do it. And somehow when we do things that are ethically right, God does ultimately get the glory. I mean, I'll have an opportunity to explain that I'm not such a good guy. If you knew me, my younger self or whatever, but I've been mentored by a Heavenly Father who's kind of taught me that you have to invest in your employees. You have to invest in your marriage. You have to invest in your business, whatever. And so there are principles of God's kingdom that just flat out work. Yeah. Whether you're a believer or not. I have clients who are decidedly not believers, but they are in alignment with good kingdom principles. So those principles work. And then if I'm humbly aware of what a difference God has made in my life, when there's an opportunity, I'm not going to take the credit. I'm going to say, God has just taught me how to do life well, and I'm so thankful for His influence. So
that's good.
I actually was going to ask you about that. I feel like a big part of your calling, we were talking about this before the show, just you obviously, for the people who don't know, Terry owns a local painting business, been successful. We were just talking about, like, what would you have done if you didn't do that? Would you do anything differently? But I really do believe that the Lord has used you through that. Just some of the rooms He's put you in, some of the people He's put you around. You've got some awesome stories. We won't get into the specifics, but just for anyone watching this, Terry's been in the homes of very, very affluent, successful people. And it seems like the Lord's kind of used you in those situations. So what have you seen, like working with and being around successful people, but specifically ones that in worldly terms have everything going for them, but don't know Jesus? Like what, because that seems to be kind of a trend that you've had throughout your business career. What have you kind of observed or taken away from that?
I don't know if I told you the story of a client of mine who I'd worked for here in the Twin Cities, and they also owned a place in France and in Palm Beach. And they wanted some work done in their Palm Beach house, so they loaded my crew, my equipment in their Gulfstream and flew us down to Palm Beach.
I've never heard this story.
Okay, and on the way down, I asked him, because he had gone from an employee at Control Data to a very, very wealthy, successful entrepreneur. And I said, I asked him for some advice. What advice would you have for a younger man, younger dad, younger husband? And he genuinely paused, and then he said, if I had to do over, I would take more time to smell the roses. He said, I barely know my children, but I now fly my nannies and my grandchildren with me around the world because I won't pass this opportunity to have a relationship with them up. And so what I've witnessed in my clientele who tend to be wealthy is that if they're happy, it isn't because of their material success. It's because they have relationships that they're enjoying, that they are investing in. And so God's idea of a kingdom based on flourishing relationships, that's something that we're created for. And And so that's just it. That every socioeconomic strata have good examples and bad examples of humanity, and the problem with prosperity is that it's really seductive, and you think, I should be happy. I should have arrived. But one of my other clients ordered a jet. The day it arrived, he ordered a new, bigger jet because he realized he wasn't the biggest tail at the airport. And so there's this insatiable pursuit of satisfaction that the world can't satisfy, but people can, and God can. So relationships, vertical and horizontal.
I actually got to share that story about my planes, but it's awkward.
It was anonymous. I was meant to.
Yeah, that's a crazy story. I think maybe one of my last questions, but I think there's guys who want to lead, and you've obviously been in a lot of different leadership positions, from father, business owner, church elder now. Is there a time in your life where you felt unqualified to lead? And I guess what advice would you give to guys who either God's put in a position of leadership, kind of like your stories that Aaron was alluding to, where it's like, man, I feel like I keep ending up in these situations. God, how do you want to use me? I feel unqualified. So how did you navigate those seasons, and what advice would you give to guys who are in a position of leadership or want to be, but maybe feel disqualified to be in it?
They're misunderstanding who they're aligned with. If they want to be in leadership and they have a relationship with God, He's the leader, and he does have what it takes to do that. And in fact, the Bible says, "I've chosen the weak things of the world to shame the strong." And so oftentimes it's been the unqualified who God has brought. If you just think of the stories through the Bible, not many that were noble, not many that were wealthy, not many that were rich. And so if you just humbly say, God, I want to be on your team. I want to see you victorious. I want your team to win. Will you let me just be on the team and you be the star? I think that's it. It isn't that there aren't great leadership skills and strategies and practices that are absolutely correct. But for the person who says, I'm unqualified, yeah, you are.
Yeah, that's good. And I think that's such a good reminder. Why it's so important to be rooted in the Word, too, where you do see these stories throughout the Bible where it's like, man, if God can use that person, He can probably use me a little bit, hopefully.
Very.
So
Yeah,
it's a good
so.
reminder, just always pointing back to the truth and going back to the Word. So it's good.
Well, speaking of truth, I've got a good one for you, Terry. When I think of you, I think one of your ways that God has uniquely gifted you is your ability to speak truth in love. With Sammy and I, like, you've had many times where you've told us something that we necessarily didn't want to hear, but we reflect and say, wow, we're really glad that we had somebody say that, in a time when it wasn't necessarily easy, and maybe there's a lot of people around you just kind of telling you what you want to hear. How do you do that? How do you speak truth in love?
By an awareness of my own flaws. That's so. And honestly, that answer came to me easily. If I had the perception that I've done it right and everyone should do it my way, and I never made any mistakes, then I wouldn't. Then I could have a condescending demeanor and attitude toward you of saying, "I did it. Well, just do it. You just do it." But I know that the good things in life have been a result of God's influence in me. And He changed me, so why wouldn't He do the same for you? So speaking the truth is love is knowing that it could come with conviction, but that's the seed of truth. That's the only hope. If I didn't tell you the truth, man, Aaron, I wouldn't love you. So I think the answer to that question is twofold. One is I'm aware of my own weakness in humanity, and I'm very aware of how much God is wanting to draw you into your best, your flourishing reality. And so that is going to be in a path of truth. And so I can say it without judgment because it's God behind it. So
Yeah. It's kind of like a coach. It's like if
Oh,
they're
it's
yelling
good.
at you, doing these, trying to make you better. It's a good sign. It means he cares about your progress and
Yeah.
wants to make you the best that you can be. Versus
That's
if
good,
a coach
Kyle.
doesn't invest in you, it's like
yeah.
So I think to your point, if we could see that correction as actual love, then I think we'd be a lot more open to it. So it's good.
Okay.
I've got one last heater for you, Terry. So there'll be guys watching this. One of my favorite things about just having you as somebody I can call, and I'm talking big decisions like the house we're sitting in. Like Sammy and I called you and Jane when we were in the process of home buying. Like we just lean on you guys. We did marriage counseling. You're somebody that I consider you like a foxhole guy. It's like if I'm making, I mean, both of you guys, if I'm making a big decision, like you two are both guys that I want
Right.
being a part of that. So say somebody's watching this and they're in the process of making, if they're not now, they will be in the process eventually of making a decision. I think you've just got really good principles, frameworks, ways that you think through making decisions. How do you approach that? Is it, I know every situation is a little bit differently, but what are kind of the principles that you use in your life or that you try to guide others to make good decisions?
Well, this is we're closing here, right?
think
Is
so.
this the last one?
You got any more
No,
busters for
that's
him?
good.
This is a good one to end on.
What I would say is I am humble by your assessment of who I am. I'm thankful that that's the truth, and I would want to encourage both of you guys to know that when I was your age, I did not have the character, disposition, eagerness, the desire that I see present in your lives now to figure out life and do it well and impact other people's lives. So if you're seeing that in me at my 3 decades older, whatever, 4 decades, 5 decades, do the math, then be encouraged that you will be that man and more when you continue to walk with God. And so I do think it just kind of goes back to my simple summary that I began this with, is that I have spent time in God's presence, and there's just, by beholding, we become changed. So I have life experience because I've made mistakes. So when you say, I'm a source of wisdom, yeah, don't do it the way I did it that time. And so there is a real value in asking for older men and women to give their input because they have sometimes learned the hard way.
And I think to close, just thinking through Proverbs, it says the beginning of or the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And you say this a lot as we've kind of recorded. It's like, yeah, I just spend time with God. Yeah, I just spend time with God. And that's kind of what solves all of our problems. And I think that's the big takeaway. We know that in truth, we've heard that, but the practicality of it, it's hard work, like you've mentioned, to get up and spend time with God. But if you do that, you are going to become more wise. You're going to have more peace. Like you're going to have those things. Spend time with God.
It is, and the key there is with God. My word for this year was presence. PRESENCE, not TS. No, like not His presence.
We want to get gifts.
I
Is what
want-
you're saying.
I want to be with God because that's ultimately what changes me. It isn't no theology didn't change the Pharisees. They knew the Bible really well, but they were such a despicable group and had no joy and couldn't lead other people to life. So the key there is not to get legalistic about it, but lean into with God.
That's good. This is great. Thanks, Terry. This is really good information. And hopefully you guys watching this, you got a lot of value out of it. Terry's obviously, like we said, a good mentor to us, a good friend, and someone that we lean on heavily. So we hope you learned some things tonight. And as always, we appreciate you spending some time to take in what we have to say. So again, thank you for watching the show. And until next time, keep advancing the kingdom. Probably should have told you that before, but we made it happen.
But
Thanks.
I was mimicking.
See you on the next one. Thanks.